Hi there, and welcome to Green Shoe Conversations. I'm Stephanie Cochran, the Executive Director for the Green Shoe Foundation, and this is episode 41. I'm really excited you guys are here with us today, and I have some of my awesome team members. I've got Mr. Stephen Brinkworth, one of our therapists. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing all right. How about
Great.
you?
I'm good. I am good. How are you, Miss Rebecca Holt?
I'm good. Glad to be
Awesome.
here.
I know it's kind of funny. I know we're all on different screens and everything, and still loving doing our Zoom, but we really are just down the hall from each other. So it's kind of fun to do this. And I want to give an update on where we are at the end. So don't let me forget, because it's been really exciting with what's going on with groups, and I want to make sure we kind of share that with everybody. So let's continue our conversations. We've been talking about how to be authentic, finding our authentic self. We're sharing a lot about our own journey, personal journeys and authenticity. Last week, Steve, you were with me along with Teresa, and we were talking about how to be authentic in our parent roles, like being authentic as a mom, as a dad, as a step parent, as a grandparent. And it's really led to some great conversations that we had. And so I'm kind of wanting to share these conversations, because really that's kind of what sparks our podcast, or things that we experience and we're talking about. And I actually got to do a podcast similar on this topic a couple months ago with Kinsey Lyons. I'll give her a shout out. She's one of our favorite guests that we like to have on here. But we were talking about, how do you not lose yourself in your significant other? Partners, spouses, but how do you stay true to yourself? Or, what we like to say, how do you stay authentic? And I'm not meaning a separation, but really even being authentic for me as a wife, or, as a partner. So that's kind of what we wanted to kind of share with y'all. And when we were talking yesterday, I was like, okay, stop. I really feel like I want to go back and relook at what is the definition for codependency, because that's kind of the gist of all of this. So y'all kind of re-educate us on that definition.
Sure. So in our model, PIA says that codependency is a disorder of immaturity that is caused by relational trauma. So at my current age, when there's something that may activate me or trigger something from my past, that immaturity may show up with my wounded child ego state, or my adapted child ego state showing up trying to run the show. And so I may respond in a way that is very childlike, even though by age I'm an adult. So there's an immaturity that takes place in my response or in my reaction, whether that be outward or internal.
Gotcha. How is that going to show up then in those intimate relationships? How will we see that?
I can share one that happened just recently. This gets into some of our needs and wants, where, over the past year, we really haven't had a whole lot of time to socialize in person with friends. And being that we're kind of making progress with vaccinations and getting to where some of those things are a little bit safer, was able to have a time that I could get together with a friend. And I haven't seen them in a long time. I was eager to get that time together to have some conversation and just reconnect. Just before I left the house, there was a part of me that showed up, an adapted part of me that showed up, that felt a lot of guilt about leaving to go hang out with my friend. And that part was trying to make sure that everybody else in the house was okay, that there's nothing else that I need to do to help make everybody else's lives easier.
Yeah.
So that guilt comes more from that adaptation of trying to maintain the peace and maintain a sense of value in the relationship, that I can do something. And it takes me out of my inherent worth, that I'm worthy, I'm valuable just the way I am, and there isn't anything I can do or not do that would change that. But that part shows up. And when that shows up, that takes me out of that authenticity in the relationship, because it robs me of having those needs and wants, my own needs and wants. So was able to talk through that and say, here's what's coming up, and it's nothing that you're doing. This is all my own stuff. So just in doing that, was able to start getting recentered in my functional adult and recognize, no, I have value. I have needs and wants.
Yeah.
I need to socialize with a friend.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, it speaks to my people pleaser part. You're right.
Mhm.
I've got to make sure, if I'm going to go hang out with a friend or go do something for me, but I've got to make sure everybody else is okay. My husband didn't have any plans for us or anything like that, versus me telling him, hey, I need to go do this, or I want to go do this. And there have been times too, where even when I'm with my friend, it's kept me from being 100% there with them, and with myself. So.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this in our parenting class, but, being who you need to be so someone else is comfortable. And I think that that's a big part of losing ourselves in a relationship. Who do you need me to be so that you're okay? And when we get in a pattern, and that's a immature thing to do, instead of embracing that authentic self, sharing that authentic self with that person of, let me just set all of me aside and be who you need me to be. And I think that that's one of the ways that codependence shows up in a relationship as well.
I remember one of the examples we were talking about is we were talking about movies and stuff, and Runaway Bride is almost like the perfect example of codependent, because she took on, even their whole personality, and the whole point in the movie was, well, what kind of eggs do you like? And she didn't know, because it was whatever eggs her at that time fiance wanted. So it's one of those things I kind of ask in my brain, well, what do I want, and what kind of eggs do I like? That kind of. Yeah,
I think a lot of times too, and this is something I've worked on in codependence and working here, but as a therapist, I know what everyone else, their feelings and their emotions most of the time, and I can do that with my partner as well. And so sometimes saying, what am I feeling right now?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't take time to often think about that,
Yeah. And I want to be very, very clear, because Steve, you brought up the ego states. When we're talking about being in the functional adult, we do not have to be there 100% of the time, because especially I think in my relationships, there are times where that adapted child does come out. Yeah. And maybe in the last week that happened. But again, that's part of that, giving myself grace, that is going to happen. And, we're perfectly imperfect. And so it's just the awareness of kind of that, and being able to go back and have the conversations of, okay, here's really what my feelings were, like you were saying, Rebecca, and here are my needs and my wants. But yeah.
Stephanie, I was going to say, I think both of our adapted child states, we've been hanging out in your office this week a little bit.
Yeah. As I said, these conversations kind of sparked out of some other conversations. Yeah, exactly. But it's so funny and and not sharing anything. I loved just, hearing, your stories, Rebecca, and how, and the outcome of when you do go back and have some of those functional adult conversations with your partner. It's amazing the kinds of conversations you can have and the connections. And it just continues just to build that weave of intimacy, with that. So how can we continue to build our authenticity? Because again, it's like a muscle. I think we have to continue to work at it and practice it. But what are some, things that we can do, and what are some things that Pia says that we can do?
There's, depending on how it's showing up, how I'm getting out of that authenticity, I may approach it in a different way. With having that focus, that people pleaser, like we were talking about, it does exactly for me what Rebecca was just describing, and I puts my focus on everybody else. So being that that's so familiar, one of the things that I do is I really try and bring it back to Steve, and sometimes even frame that as little Steve. What is it that little Steve needs right now? And that can kind of really help to reframe the lens that I'm looking through and paying attention to listen to my body, to listen to what needs are coming up, what I want to do. And granted, I'm not going to get those wants 100% of the time. I don't have to be in that functional adult 100% of the time. But in using some of the affirmations that we have at work, some of the shame bind affirmations, yeah, I have a right to go play. I have a right to my needs and wants. But to be able to offer myself those affirmations and set some boundaries for myself that, you know, I'd help with some things that right now, kind of like you mentioned, going over and spending time with friends, my head may still be on that to-do list and not with myself and them. So setting some boundaries that this can wait.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this time for me. And sometimes that for me means turning off the music, turning off the TV, my phone somewhere else. So I don't have those opportunities to distract myself and get focused on something else, but I have that time and space for me. So part of it is those affirmations, and part of it is really paying attention to where my boundaries are for me too.
And those affirmations are really a great tool for one of her big points, and that's to esteem yourself. Self-esteem is one of our 5 core issues. And so many times, and again, I've got close friends and family members, I've watched them do this. They attach their self-esteem to the other person, versus esteeming themselves and giving themselves the affirmation and knowing that they are worthy, regardless of if they're even with anybody else, or, who their partner is.
Yeah. And I think just like, we have to, in recovery, work on a daily basis to esteem ourselves. It comes up from time to time in relationships when we do that, but we can't put that expectation on our partner of, I need you to help me feel better about myself right now.
Right.
That's an unrealistic expectation to give to anyone. Right. But a lot of times, like you said, Stephanie, we're leaning on them to say, how am I doing right now? How you feel about me right now. But we have to be able to have our own worth, our own self-esteem.
Yeah. And heaven forbid they're having a rough day and they don't give that back to us, which is about them and what's in their reality. And we internalize it as we're not worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's that reality piece then. And that plays an important part in everybody in the relationship staying authentic to themselves. And you guys talk a little bit about that, because we were really kind of intertwining yesterday when we were talking about how our reality and our partner's reality impact our own authenticity.
Yeah, I think one of the things, is you have to be able to embrace who you are. So your truth, your reality, your identity, and also support the other person in their truth, their reality, their identity. It's such an interesting thing that we experience entering relationships, intimate relationships, because we come and there's us, and then there's a couple, and then there's us and a couple. It's a lot of work to define what all those are. Yeah.
One of the points that I think, you were making to me yesterday, a couple of times was, being able to support and respect their truth. And again, especially that way, it allows me to have my own truth and voice that, but to be able to also respect maybe that adapted child doesn't come out.
I think it's also really important to recognize too, that our truths may not look the same. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But to honor that I have my truth and you have your truth, and we can both have them at the same time. When we get out of that functional adult and into some of those other ego states, there gets to be more of a sparring match that can go on about trying to get onto the same page. And that's something to be aware of too, because it's also taking me out of my authenticity. There's a rigidness that can start to come up with that. To honor that I have my truth, my thoughts, my feelings. I'm going to think about them and feel about this different than my partner does.
Yeah. And sometimes being able to sit down and talk about each other's truths, that's what leads into those good conversations, or will lead into building that relationship even stronger. And again, we're not saying that at some point you have to agree. You don't. Some of the best times are when you don't agree.
Yeah.
But you're able to you're able to talk through it, which absolutely, I mean, one thing I know is that we keep saying over and over gets into, you've got to ask for your needs and wants. First, know what they are. I think that's, and maybe that's the hardest part. I don't know. I know for me, sometimes that was trying to, especially my wants, you know, is it okay for me to ask what I want, what I actually want? And versus it's just easier for me to take care of everybody else's needs, so I don't have to worry about my own.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that need, Stephanie, we talk about this, is I need help.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one. There's some shame whenever I need help, but sometimes we have to share that with our partner.
Yeah, we do.
Absolutely.
And allow them to help us, you know.
That part.
Yeah, that part. Yeah, I can ask for it, but I'm actually I need to let them. Yeah, let them help me. And I have to be honest, that I think especially in my recovery with codependency and learning this model, that's been one of the biggest gifts that I wouldn't have expected is, wow, when people actually, I let people help me, it's amazing, you know. One, I actually get what I need and what happens in that relationship. So whatever messages and fears I had built up and shame didn't happen, you know, and having those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I do think one of our funniest parts of our conversation we wanted to share is how, you know, we are given unrealistic role models growing up. Is this a good way to enter into this one?
You bet.
Yeah. on what a relationship should be. And what I mean by that is our Disney princess relationships. You know, Cinderella and her Prince Charming. You know, Snow White is rescued by her prince. So is Aurora. And it's really funny kind of going through all of that. And if you haven't seen them, and again, it's not something I'm going to show, but one of the funniest little comedy things we were watching was Disney princess couple therapies, and you know, talking about Ariel and Prince Eric. Am I saying that right? I'm doing pretty good. I don't have girls, so this is kind of coming back. How they met and got married after 3 days. I mean, and quote, lived happily ever after. How is that realistic? You know. So,
yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of funny looking at all of that, but we've got to be careful about that Disney romance and some of those roles and finding ourselves and making sure we don't lose that.
Yeah, there's a lot, I know we touched on this, but there's a lot of messages about who I'm supposed to be in a relationship. And Steve, I know you have, you know, some of that as well, not just the Disney princess, but the Disney prince.
You know, and it's not even just Disney, but as we see,
Hallmark Channel.
Disney does a wonderful job of setting some of those role expectations in ways that are authentic. They look great on the screen, but real life, it's not authentic. And to even think about from Prince Charming, from that role, where's my focus? On being charming, on fixing, on rescuing, on everybody but me. Think about that knight in shining armor piece and some of the work that we do through Green Shoe and what that looks like for, if I were to ask Prince Charming what his boundaries look like, it's pretty one up and walled up.
I was going to say the walls of the kingdom.
Walls of the kingdom, yeah, exactly.
But you know, even the shining armor, been in front of a piece of shining armor before. This kind of ties back to what you and I were talking about yesterday too. It's like a mirror.
Yeah.
That guy's not even there. It's a reflection of you in that suit. It takes away from that authenticity and who's actually in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not Disney bashing. I want to be very, very clear. Yeah, at all, because they've also, I think, have recognized some of this. And again, Steve, you know, we're talking about one of our favorite Disney movies is Brave. I love that Merida goes out and she says, I'm shooting for my own hand,
Mhm.
my little girl inside was like, yes, so, and the new live action Mulan shows, her not having to be dependent on somebody else, but she's able to ask for help, from her other soldiers, or I say team members, they're not, but so, it was really, I think, giving those messages now, to be ourselves and find out who we are and be able to ask for that.
You even mentioned Shrek yesterday.
Yes.
And how poignant that is to know that beauty is not just this facade.
Mm-hmm.
There's a depth internally that, like he says, like an onion, there's layers.
Mhm.
And so being able to really learn about ourselves, about the other person, to be relational, to be authentic, to know what is it that I like, what is it I don't like, what is it that you like, what is it that you don't like, really come together in an authentic way is so much more meaningful than any of the fantasies we got fed as kids.
Yeah. I think we found a new podcast series, maybe for summertime, the model through the movies. Because I'm trying to run all these movies. Hey, this one, yeah. But Shrek itself, there's so many awesome messages that are given in that movie. So yeah, that may be something else to explore. So hey, awesome news. We are back doing groups here at Green Shoe. We are completing our 3rd week, still under COVID protocols, which are awesome and have been doing great. So we want to encourage folks, if you have not felt like it was time to reach out, give us a call, schedule that phone assessment. Let's kind of talk about where you're at. We are scheduling into summer, with that, but guess what? Summer's coming up really quick. So this is a great time, and it's felt really good to kind of be back and doing all the groups. And I know you guys have really enjoyed that and working back with participants. So we want to encourage you to reach out. Again, if you have any podcast ideas or conversations you're having that you would love to get our perspective on, make sure you reach out at info@greenshoe.org. Always check out our website at greenshoe.org. Get lots of information, upcoming parenting classes, the retreats. You now can buy our Green Shirt t-shirts from the website. That's something that dropped this week. That was pretty exciting. So lots of really awesome stuff. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.